Trophy Wife, based on a 1980 hit comic play by Pierre Bareilles and Jean-Pierre Gredy, is a film that successfully maintains the story's original 1970s atmosphere in provincial location. In French, the title Potiche has two meanings: a kind of vase that is not very useful, but more so decorative. The second, a woman in the shadow of a man. As an aesthetic, it has a theatrical and performative quality, reflective of the 70s. The color palettes chosen are reminiscent of its contemporary American film and photography, an emphasis on a washed art style, utilizing complementary colors like brown, blue, orange, cyan, teal, and beige. Red as a dominant hue pops out the most. With a mix of archival and studio footage, the film gains a sense of kairos without explicitly locking itself into a time frame that is inflexible to aging. So one defining metaphor, which speaks to Suzanne's role in the beginning of the film and her arc throughout, is not too unlike a vase. Being in the shadow of her husband for 30 years, she has been figuratively sitting on a shelf, going through the mundane motions of being a housewife, but still managing to just be for decor. The vase may be expensive and valuable, but also hollow and without a material pragmatic function. Sure, a vase can hold items, but so too can a tub, a bin, a basket, or a box. It's unpretty but shaped for constant use, not designated to a shelf to be dusted once in a while. Suzanne jogging and writing poetry are repeated throughout, once at the beginning and in the end, to be specific. She first wears a red outfit, then blue. But the poetry is brought into the middle of the film by Nadege, which makes this interesting because I think the poems, speak to the troubles that Suzanne Meili faced. The first was something lighthearted and spontaneous while out on her jog, and so at this point she believed she was content with her life. Then as the plot unfolds, we see more of Mr. Pajol's abusive and disrespectful behavior, and so she writes another poem. But this time it's much more somber. Nadege's poem happens at the turning point in the story where Mr. Pajol returns to the factory, perhaps foreshadowing his role to come. And lastly, in the jogging scene near the end, post-time skip, Suzanne wore this red, which I mentioned beforehand, as this symbol for her newfound strength, leadership, and power. Appearance-wise, the working class is depicted in a few ways. For men, the majority in the factory are dressed in casual street attire. Some look to be in their late 30s and 40s with a bit of gray in their beard coming off as rugged and restless. For the women, age also plays a part, but what's most striking is how all of them have muted color palette contrasted against Suzanne's bright scheme. Then, the working class is mostly dressed in a plaid, long-sleeve leather jacket, few articles of accessories, maybe some schemes of gray, tones of red and brown. Then meanwhile, cyan, blues, reds, pinks, and beige are all of what the Pajol family mostly wear. I think her desire to work alongside her father was simply out of the interest of starting and keeping her own family together with her husband. As mentioned near the end, she voted against Suzanne for that very reason, because she wanted her husband to be closer while she was pregnant. Mr. Pajol worked his way into assuring he got his way by using Joelle's primary concerns as leverage. However, her personality does exude this level of confidence that a modern woman carries while working as part of leadership in company. I don't think she's being deceptive without reason, but there is some truth to her mannerisms, characteristics, and demeanor. I think Laurent is portrayed as a caring, artistic, and outgoing person who takes after Suzanne's warm nature. He showcases his interest in politics and art that leads him to assisting with the improvement of the company. While his sister describes him as a lefty, which the film does speak within context of the 1970s political climate, I should disclaim, I would describe him more as an open-minded or non-confrontational, stark contrast from who Joelle is. She is more so nosy, assertive, and outspoken about communism. I would consider them as foils to each other, as Joelle is the foil to Suzanne as well. Earlier in the film spoke about wanting him and Suzanne to see a new day dawning together. What he stood for with his revolution and what Suzanne also fought for in her own way aligned to some extent. With the end, her victory as the new mayor MP was the payoff to her effectiveness and hard work in the factory and campaign. Being an example to all women in the working class, she understood what it's like to have others hold her down, and you could say she broke through that barrier in a way that Babin did not for most of his life. Even if they couldn't trust each other and see eye to eye, Susan wanted everyone to cooperate in unison and brotherhood, treating workers with respect and care. as her father probably would have wanted. So in that vein, she didn't see Babine as an enemy necessarily, and in a way provided a fresh slate for the future of France. Or if you want to think about it as this, a fresh coat of paint, in an otherwise mundane swash of gray. In a general sense, Potiche is a feminist tale. It can be placed more in the context of what it's like to be a trophy housewife and working class individual in the 70s. And I feel like this can also relate to the nature of today's climate with talks of DEI, feminist movement, workers' rights, workers' strikes, the idea of a woman being the lead actor, actively finding, searching, and fighting for a purpose, a career, a meaningful place in society for the betterment of everyone, can be a story of triumph and inspiration. And there is a sense of tastefulness that is done here, where I see lots of films nowadays try to achieve that in more of a girl boss way, and it comes off as inauthentic and forced because it's mostly written from the perspective of someone who is socially oppressed or inhibited in some way. Perhaps it's a mental game that they try to embed in their own work as a self-insert. In any case, I find Suzanne's role in the film is much more independent and finds fulfillment in no longer being just a housewife without a real sense of freedom in her marriage or career. As said before, her actions aren't just for women, but for all of France, which makes the overall film feel more than just about feminism, because her arc is applicable to anyone in a position where they feel they're being inhibited based on status. It isn't just about her being a woman, it's also about what she brings to the table in terms of freshness, in terms of soul and life. And again, that fresh coat of paint that the company has been missing for so long. My interpretation of the overall message is generally about how women don't need to live in the shadow of men, or how true change for the working class comes from the leadership of men obsessed with power. It takes someone warm, invitational, and understanding to help be the transformative leader for those without the voice or authority to make it happen on their own. Even when in doubt, it takes independence and a strong goal to guide others to success, and I believe Suzanne is the paradigm for that.